Today's show is brought to you by Cotswolds Outdoor, Cross Bikes, Garmin and Cumulus. Hello and welcome to We Need More Heroes. In the age of Donald Trump as president and Kim Kardashian a role model for millions, it's easy to lose hope. But there are still brilliant people out there who can inspire us to live better. Join me, George Beasley, on a mission around the globe to find them. We Need More Heroes aims to inspire and guide ordinary people to live extraordinary lives. Visit weneedmoreheroes.co for show notes and more info. If you enjoy the episode, please leave us a review and rating on iTunes and subscribe if you'd like to hear more. Thanks for listening. Hello and welcome to another episode of We Need More Heroes. Today's guest is really grabbing life by the ghoulies. To list but a few of the amazing feats that she's been involved in, she's only the third British and 14th international woman to ski the full distance to the South Pole, which sounds epic, and this involved hauling 80 kilos in one of the world's most unforgiving environments. It's not something I know a lot about, so I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. She's yacht raced 35,000 miles around the world. Race lasted 10 months and over 180 days at sea, so half a year at sea in treacherous conditions. And again, seems to be a theme of developing grit here, which I'm really looking forward to finding a bit more about. And as if that wasn't enough, she's paddled 600 miles down the Mekong River in a dugout canoe, which quite unusually she bought from a tribal chief in rural Cambodia. So real variety in these adventures and expeditions. There's a boatload more that I hope we'll have time to get into, but without further ado, Paula Reid, welcome to We Need More Heroes.
Thank you, George. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for coming on. So before we get started, I do like to have a few quick questions to get the juices flowing. So it's got to be the first thing that comes to mind. They're a bit silly and a bit pointless, but just go for it. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Batman or Spider-Man?
Batman.
Why?
I didn't know if you wanted the why. I answered as a girl. I think he's more sexy.
We haven't had that answer yet, but love it. And I think I agree. I mean, Bruce Wayne, he's a bit more of a hunk than the nerdy Spider-Man.
Yeah, it's black and a nice car, and yeah, Spider-Man looks a bit for a 7-year-old.
So, Paula, what did you want to be growing up?
Well, Lara Croft, if we're going to talk superheroes.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. People normally don't go for something superhero-y, so that's good. Yeah, Lara Croft was... Did you ever play Tomb Raider?
No, I love her films. I just like the character. So she's not really a superhero, is she? But she's pretty cool. She's there's the rich bit, which I'm not that bothered about, but she's got a cool attitude. She's got a sense of humour. She's obviously quite sexy, but she does all that amazing travelling stuff, which I love.
Yeah, sounds awesome, actually. Okay, the final one of the quickfire. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Well, flying. I think, I'm sorry, that's quite obvious, but I dream a lot about flying, and I'm sure other people do, but, just the idea of soaring above the world and looking down on it. I've been in a hot air balloon, and you see such amazing sights just looking from an aerial view. So it'll be flying. Where
did you do that hot air ballooning?
I've done a couple, but I've only done them above the UK. So I haven't done one of the really big sort of African or Amazon type balloon flights. But England is just fascinating, especially at dawn. And you've got the sun rising, and then you've got a few people walking their dogs, and you can see all the little paths that the sheep and rabbits take across the fields, and you just look down onto people's houses, which I think is quite funny as well.
Was it scary at all, or is it, because it's fairly slow, is it nice and chilled out? Does it feel relaxing as opposed to exhilarating?
It's relaxing once you're going, unless you're scared of heights, but it's quite full on to actually launch off and land, because the basket is huge. It's a really heavy, big basket, and the sound of the roar of the gas flames is quite intimidating, and it's quite bumpy to launch off and land. So it's quite a big monster that I don't think people realise when they first turn up, they're picturing the tranquil, peaceful flight, but the takeoff and landing are kind of, quite exhilarating, quite scary in a way.
Definitely have to add that to the bucket list. So now that we've got the completely pointless questions out the way, I'm always interested to hear how the guests describe when you get that ubiquitous question. So what do you do? What do you normally meet that question with?
Well, I've got different aspects of my life, so it depends the setting and the person who asks. Now, I quite like saying that I'm an adventurer. If it's a dinner party or a social setting, it just gets people to, what do you mean? What do you mean? And it just starts a conversation. So even if it's a formal setting or a networking evening or something quite boring, I still love saying adventurer because it does get the conversation going. And then, hopefully it's like a lure and it attracts the other person into having a chat. But I also do leadership development. So I sometimes say I'm a performance catalyst, which is one way of describing the fact that I like to inspire and ignite and empower people with the business side of what I do.
Has that always been something that you're interested in, or has it been the adventure first and then that comes secondary?
I think adventure first, but I love the way it twines in with my work. So I'm currently doing a master's degree in positive psychology. So I think the great future for me is the mashup between the science of positive psychology, what I've learned from adventures, and then bang it into leadership and business. I love the combination of those three.
That sounds amazing. And can you tell us a little bit more about positive psychology? Is something that I'm sure most people have heard about, but it's not something that people are overly familiar with. So can you just give us the 2-minute bullet point what positive psychology is? Is it the movement started by Martin Seligman and actually, I'll let you go for it. You know a lot more than I do.
That's a good start, though. So psychology is normal before that movement is about fixing people who need to be fixed. So if you look at human sort of happiness and flourishing and functioning on a scale, if you go from -10 to 0, traditional psychology fixes those people. So say they're depressed or stressed or got post-traumatic stress disorder or any of those. So it's a lot about therapy and counselling. Whereas if you look at people who are okay, on a scale of 0 to +10, you look at how can you optimalise their flourishing and functioning. So they're not only really happy, but they're really functioning well as an individual and within society. So positive psychology was to counterbalance or counteract the therapy and the negative psychology, if you like. And then it's onto its third stage, which is also taking the dark side of life and making it positive. So my dissertation is going to be about adventure psychology, where I think, life is tough, life is hard, and it's how we cope and how we survive and how we are resilient and gutsy and gritty that really matters. So positive psychology version 2 is what we're on, which is the dark side of positive psychology. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the tenets of positive psychology to try and help people live better if they're already doing sort of okay? And I guess the reason why I started this show is because I talked to so many people who seemingly had a great life on paper. They'd been to university, got good grades, got a good job, moved down to the city, but then felt pretty unfulfilled, like they didn't really have meaningful jobs or relationships or community. And so a lot of people were looking for something else. And I think, like you say, adventure is a way of turning up the volume on your life and making you feel a little bit more engaged with the day to day and like your actions really matter. So just interested in what you think are the takeaways that you try and apply to your life to live better from positive psychology and maybe how that intertwines with adventure.
I'm doing a Master's of Science, and it's very scientifically based. So things like the outdoors has been proven to be good for us psychologically and physically. So there's the great outdoors. There's a sense of awe and wonder about the world. So when you're in nature or when you're trekking or mountaineering, that a sense of absolute wonder of the beauty of the world. There's obviously having just happiness. So that's quite often called hedonistic happiness. So it's kind of short term, but it's joy and laughter and thrills and all that. But the longer term happiness is called eudaimonic, and it's more about having purpose and meaning in your life. So it's got a longer, deeper, more lasting impact. And then I also believe in living life to the full, hence my bucket list. So I think for me, that's about seizing and savouring. So seizing the day, but savouring the moment. So seizing the big challenging stuff and pushing yourself and getting yourself out of your comfort zone and doing big, difficult things, but also savouring the moment and taking time to, enjoy the moments, to let the magic happen, to just look at an amazing cobweb in the morning, that sort of stuff. So I think it's both.
Do you have any practical ways that you make sure that you implement the sort of things that you were just talking about, or is it just being mindful of them?
I know mindfulness and meditation are very strong and powerful, and a lot of people talk about them these days. I'm a bit rubbish at both because I'm such an active person. So for me, it's more about, I write diaries quite a bit. So if I'm on an adventure or a challenge, I write a diary to help me kind of process and really sort of feel for the second time what I've been doing. And then, of course, reviewing those diaries when I get home. If I do a speech or I've written a book or reading my diary, it kind of helps me relive the moments. So I do that, and that's quite a practical thing to do, I guess. And then I'm good at just stopping and looking at amazing things. So be it a scene or a bit of nature or an amazing person, I'm quite good at just stopping and going, wow. I guess that's a habit.
But I think it generally all comes down to what makes us happy. And is happiness the right goal, particularly with things like positive psychology now, or the general state of society means that we think that we should try to be happy. But you mentioned eudaimonia before, which was the sort of ancient Grecian type of happiness that they were looking for. But then there was also people who thought that you perhaps shouldn't aim to be happy. Maybe you should aim to be impactful or virtuous or realize your skill to help society in the utmost fashion. So do you think happiness is the ultimate goal that we should be heading for?
I think it's sort of about a fifth of the equation. I mean, I guess you could say it's a selfish thing to be happy, but I think you can infect others with your happiness. That's okay. So if you go back to Martin Seligman, he mentions 5 different things for long-lasting or eudaimonic well-being or psychological well-being, or whatever you want to call it. And happiness is definitely one of them. And I believe in it. I believe in having fun and being a bit childlike and having hysterics and stuff. That's all good for us. And I don't think we all do it enough, to be honest. But there's also, relationships, the aspect of, as you say, sort of helping others or the community or giving back. The sense of achievement, as you say, not necessarily the end, but the journey, I think, is an important part of that. And then, as I say, the purpose and meaning. So why are we here? Not the big question, but what am I trying to achieve in my life, and what's the footprint I'm going to leave behind? It's big stuff, isn't it?
It is. It's the biggest stuff. This kind of stuff is the thing that is difficult to spend time on, because it does take a long time and we change, but we're also so busy. I'm sure we probably end up speaking about that again, but can we just go back to the start of your journey to adventure and maybe tie it all together? So how did you get into adventure?
I was quite lucky. I went to quite a progressive school, so great big comprehensive school, but quite modern in its thinking. And a few of us applied and were selected to go to India for a month when I was about 15, and health and safety were out the window. It was so not a sanitized school trip. It was a whole month in deep rural India where they hadn't seen white people before, and there was all sorts of situations we had to deal with. So that was pretty full on for a 15-year-old, and I loved it. I felt like I was in my element, actually, even though it was really hot, dusty, dirty, scary, horrifying stuff going on, and really out of our comfort zone and cultural shock and all that. But it suited me and I really enjoyed it. And then around that same time, when I was about 16, 17, I used to review my calendar, my physical calendar at the end of each year, and write down just the headlines for reference, like buying a car or passing the driving test type stuff. And I realised that some years were a bit empty and a bit boring, and some years, were packed with more interesting experiential stuff. So I just tipped that around and decided to do it a bit more proactively. So hence the sort of bucket list thing. which is, really thinking about what do I want to achieve in my life? Where do I want to go? Big stuff, small stuff, ridiculous things, funny things, huge things. And it's really pushed my life onward more than if I hadn't had one. So I guess that's another practical tip, is about having a list of everything that you want to do. And I don't call mine a bucket list, because that's about all the things that you want to do before you kick the bucket and die. But I think it's a live life to the full list.
India was one of the places that I think probably was most impactful for me in the sort of limited traveling that I have done. But what was your impression of India, and what do you think you learned, and how did it change you?
My impression, and I am talking a few years ago, it was a lot less developed. So even flying into what was Bombay, the shanty towns, the squalor, the disabilities, the begging and all that. I just remember being hit. And I think it was like Christmas Day, weirdly, when we landed, like British summer, British winter, but it was really hot. So just the noise, the smells, the squalor, the dust, the heat just hitting me like a massive shock. So that was my first impression, really, especially as a fairly, stroppy teenager type person. It's just such a stunning country, but so different to like England. So I think it's a country which is almost the most contrasting. It's vivid and it's full on, isn't it? The sights, the smells, the colours, the culture, the religion, the flowers, the temples, everything. It's quite a full and rich environment, especially if you land in a capital city or something. And then we went rural and we worked and played with the Indians. And one of my impressions there was about their sense of, if you like, karma, that what will be, which I found sort of slightly frustrating in a way, but I can understand where they're coming from with it, because we were trying to make things happen. We were trying to build a community centre and renovate an old well and sort people out a bit with our first aid kits and stuff. But there was a bit of a sense of, what will be with them, which, as I say, I found a bit frustrating.
Is that, I guess, the opposite to the mind frame that people are trying to popularize now? I don't know about a positive psychology's movement on it, but it tends to be now that people think that their destiny is in their own control, and if you just believe enough and never give up, then you can change whatever you want. Whereas I guess the religious connotations there mean that they think there are many afterlives, and therefore whatever's happening now is just sort of fine, and we'll just wait for the next one. I think it's something like that. And excuse me for not being 100% au fait with my sort of Indian religions and exactly what it all means. But if you're talking about people saying I can and I will, I personally believe in that. But I also think as a society, it's making us a bunch of individuals a bit, whereas at least over there and in many other societies, of course, there's a lovely sense of community and looking after each other. Yeah. Do you think there's a way to instill a sense of community now? I mean, the adventure clique, maybe I should call it, is, or maybe that's not quite the right word, but you sort of know what I mean. The adventure clan, people who are into that kind of thing, it's quite close knit, and it seems like there's a bit of a sense of community. But is that something that you've managed to implement in your life?
Yes, I think the adventure community is quite interesting because you have got that. You've got that individual who's determined to succeed and get to the top of the mountain, and you've got some solo efforts going on as well. Solo round the world yachts people, or solo sort of South Pole expedition people. They're so insular and self-determined and self-driven. But then you've got the idea of helping each other, if you like. So there's definitely an etiquette about looking after each other, looking out for each other, sharing food. It's definitely a community, and it's definitely a community of fairly like-minded people. But I think you've got the rugged solo person, and then you've got the sort of group mentality of looking after each other as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you just tell us the story behind the South Pole adventure, or expedition, I should call it?
How long have you got, George?
How long have you got? You can give us the abridged version if you like, or just the bullet points, either or. I'd love to hear it in as much detail as you'd like to tell it.
Wow. Well, I think, first of all, if I just explain what I actually did, because there's a bit of confusion about the different sort of challenges and expeditions. So it's called Ski the Full Distance. So you actually fly in and start at the coast of Antarctica. So it's got to be recognised as a coastal point, and then you ski all the way into the South Pole. So it's a much bigger, longer expedition than, for instance, like Prince Harry and the heroes did Ski the Last Degree, where you can fly into 89 degrees south and ski that last degree.
Lazy.
So I did. Well, I didn't like to say it. I didn't, George. You said it. I didn't, mate. I'm not
giving
saying
this
that.
country a bad rap, isn't he? If you're going to do it properly.
What, with all the Help for Heroes guys?
I shouldn't have said that.
No, you were joking, and we have joked about it. But no, just the difference is, we're skiing 1,000 kilometres. So we started at 82 degrees 20. It's all uphill, which people don't realise, I don't think. And it's into the wind, because the wind is coming off the plateau of the South Pole. And so you're skiing into wind, uphill. You climb 3,300 metres altogether. You're in about minus 30, minus 40 degrees temperature, pulling the pulk, which is the sledge, which is about 80 kilos. And we skied for about 12 hours a day. Plus we had about 5 hours of admin or hygiene or cooking and all that. So there were 19-hour days, which for me was relentlessly full on as an experience for 46 days in a row.
Why did you decide to do that? I mean, it seems like for a lot of people in adventure, it seems very exciting and amazing, but a lot of people, it sounds like their worst nightmare.
Well, as I say, I believe in living life to the full, and it's one of those seizing ones where you push yourself hard, you do something extreme, and therefore, for me, you're living more deeply and widely than if you hadn't done it. So one year I just thought, I wonder what that involves. I never thought that I was the type or able to do the whole distance to the South Pole. I honestly thought it was for famous, bearded, tough blokes. But I met a girl, funny enough, who'd done it herself, Helen, and she said, yeah, you can do it. So I was like, oh, okay. So she made it possible in my mind, I suppose, that somebody such as me, a girl from Surrey could actually do something as huge as that, which I thought was out of my radar.
How did you go about actually planning it and making it happen?
I had broken my Achilles when I was first inquiring about it, which wasn't conducive to skiing 1,000 kilometres. But a year later, I went for it. So it took a year of preparation and training and planning. So I went to Norway twice to train and to learn how to ski with free heels and to pull a pulk while you're skiing. So 2 massive trips to Norway to practice free heel skiing and pulling a pulk. I did loads and loads of fitness. So I got a couple of big Porsche racing car tyres and just did tyre pulling for 6 days a week for months and months and months. Went to gym and all that. And then I met as many people as I could who had knowledge or who'd been there. And then, there was all the admin and crazy life that gradually got more and more sort of out of control the nearer the time got. So there's a lot to do. There's physical, mental, psychological, logistics, for a whole year before I left. And on the point of money, it is expensive. To be absolutely honest, the whole package of the trip is about 35 to 40,000 pounds, which is mainly because of all the flights. There are a lot of flights involved, and if you're flying within Antarctica, they're obviously really expensive. So I think there was about 11 flights involved in that trip in the most inhospitable conditions. So I think 90% of the cost is those flights and the fuel drops and stuff that has to happen for you to fly. That's why it's so expensive. But for me, I spend my money on experiences and adventures. I don't spend it on other stuff. And I save up for these things and, a bit of remortgaging the house. But then I gradually pay it back. And it's just the way I personally choose to spend my money. it's just a lot of money.
And did you consider sponsorship?
I tried so hard, and so many big, good companies said, wow, brilliant, good for you. Sorry, we can't sponsor you, but, have a great trip. But then, sometimes I do a speech or sell books when I get back. So that kicks in as a sort of post-trip payment.
Yeah. What were some of the toughest things about it? I mean, obviously you mentioned it's 30 or 40 below and the wind's in your face. There's lots of things that sound really tough about it, but what did you find the most challenging?
So I had 31 fears that I listed before I left, from everything from death to having a pee in the cold. So there's 31 things, but there was 3 things I found hardest. One was the relentlessness of it, and I didn't expect it to be quite so full on for so many hours a day. So an absolute tiredness and exhaustion of being constantly on your guard and physically, being demanded your resources and so on for 19 hours a day for 46 days. I didn't expect that. I didn't get on with my tent mate, but I don't want to talk about it too much because it's tricky, but it didn't help. So that at the end of each day, there was no laughter or chat. There was just sort of more frozen sort of atmosphere going on inside the tent as outside. But I also got a thing called polar thigh, which is a really nasty cold injury on both my legs on day 7 of 46 days. And that just deteriorated and got really painful. So I think skiing to South Pole was hard, but having 2 bad legs that I had to tend to every night made it 3 times harder.
So what was it that kept you going then?
Giving up at various points is a very pleasant option. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the easiest option because then you've got to deal with that, but it's certainly the most appealing and pleasant option at various points during various adventures and challenges that I've done. But that's kind of not the point. The point is to push through and to see what you're made of and dig deep and all that. And that's, I think, where you're truly understanding who you are, what you're made of. It's where you really learn. It's where you get your resilience and your guts and your grits and your courage from, and the pride. I mean, I had 2 phrases printed on my skis. One is pain is temporary, pride is forever. And that's a phrase that I live by, in that pain, be it physical or psychological, or shit happens, but if you push through and you deal with it and you cope well and you keep your dignity and you don't give up, then that stays with you forever. And on my other ski was choose your attitude. And I think, if we're talking about psychology again, but I think attitude is like 90 to 95% of the game. So I had to sort my head out basically with the pain and the polar thigh. I've got a little sort of resource of gritty, resilient tips and tools and phrases that I totally got through and had to make up some more on this trip. So, there was stuff that I knew would keep me going and points of reference. And I've done stuff that, like the sailing around the world, where I've learned a lot about myself and what I'm capable of. But I exhausted even that bucket of resources, and I had to make up other things that just kept me going. So it was mental positive attitude, I think, that kept me going through it all.
To try not to derail the conversation again too much, just on that point, you mentioned the mental positive attitude and positive psychologists we've talked a lot about, but at what point do you think that you should draw the line to positive thinking? So it can be dangerous if somebody is overly optimistic, and you often find it with some crazy Americans. I don't know why, but they just seem to, they just have this overwhelming just lack of connection to reality, I guess. And I completely understand that in order to achieve big things, you need to believe that you can, and you need to put a lot of hard work in. But then there's also the fact that reality is out there. So if you work as hard as you can and you believe that you're going to get to the South Pole, but you get hit by a car, you won't make it there. So what are your thoughts on that? And do you ever, how do you walk that line?
It is a line, but so I call it feasible belief, when you believe that you can, but it's feasible. There's reasons why you believe you can. So skiing South Pole, at first I didn't think I could do it, but then when Helen said you could, I realised that I'd done a lot of tough stuff in my life, and I'm not stupid. So, you swat up, you learn about hygiene, and you look after yourself, and you're intelligent about situational awareness and assessment, and you make conscious decisions about whether you're letting the team down and all that. So you have to be intelligent about it. Having said that, I think we are so much more capable than we realise. So I think we should err more on the side of pushing through and doing tough stuff than giving up. So, it wasn't a light decision. I took all the factors into account. I was knowledgeable and intelligent and practical about my situation. So it wasn't a light or dumb decision. And I knew that if ever I got so bad that I either had an infection or I was letting down the team, I would quit.
Did you have any close calls?
Polar thigh is a serious condition, and I've still got the scars to prove it. And I was in bandages for 5 months after getting back. Wow. So it's a serious stuff. So for me, that was the closest to everything, giving up or thinking, oh my God, I'm in trouble and stuff. But once I'd managed to work out my head and think, hold on a minute, I'm currently coping. I can deal with pain. And as long as I fight off infection and obviously, look after the hygiene and manage the condition, then why not actually carry on going for it? So sort of day 1 and day 2 of actually getting the condition were the worst. After that, it was just coping in the cold. So obviously trying not to lose your fingers or get frostbite or anything.
Did you find any really good resources to find out about polar expeditions before you went?
I trained with Helen, who ran a Norwegian company called Newland. The Norwegians really know what they're talking about when it comes to skiing to the South Pole. So that was quite interesting. The resource of, the Norwegian mentality and kit and equipment and experience was really handy. And then the actual expedition company were brilliant and really supportive. But there was little things like I got really bad blisters when I was training in Norway, and I thought, if that happens in Antarctica, I'm in trouble. So there was even a book called Fixing Your Feet. I can't remember the author, but I wrote to him. I said, look, I've got this problem. I'm going to ski to Antarctica. And he sent me loads of useful tips. There's tiny things like keeping your feet okay, and the fact you can't use most sun creams because they've got water in them. So there's only one sun cream in the whole world that you can ski to Antarctica in, and that's Elizabeth Arden's 8-hour cream, because it's not water-based. There's big stuff and small stuff that you have to learn to do something like this.
Is that journey to the South Pole the expedition you're most proud of?
I'm proud of both that and the Round the World Yacht Race, because I hadn't sailed before, and there's a lot of sailors who take part in these Round the World Yacht Races. And I just didn't have that experience and knowledge. So I literally went in green physically and mentally to that. And I feel like I managed to pull it off despite puking up everywhere and not knowing what I was doing and banging myself on the boat and having to learn to sail and go through the Southern Ocean around Cape Horn and 22-meter waves and all sorts. So I'm really proud of that. I think equally to skiing to the South Pole.
The yacht race just sounds incredible as well. So you didn't, I wondered whether you were a sailor beforehand, because I thought it doesn't look like something you can just dip your toes in. But it seems like you didn't have that experience. So how did you end up getting on this boat with those guys?
Well, it was the global challenge, and actually it was set up by Sir Che Blythe to potentially for people like me. So he wasn't looking for the elite professional sailors. He was trying to make yacht racing more accessible to the everyday person. So in a way, I was kind of a good profile for it. And then the trouble was I applied really late, went on a waiting list, and only had 2 months' notice before I got my place. So I applied and they liked my attitude, but then they didn't have any places available till it was really late. So part of the problem was that I just didn't have a chance to really learn before I left.
So they just let you go anyway, just learn on the ropes. Literally.
Yeah, I learned on the job. But I think a lot of it, again, was about attitude rather than aptitude. So if you've got the right attitude, you're going to give it a go. You're going to be safe. You're going to look out for yourself. You're going to be responsible. You're going to learn. You're going to try. You're going to be tough, all that sort of stuff. I think they recruited me because I was a good profile for the race, as in ordinary person, and that I had the right attitude. You can learn stuff, really.
Yeah, I've seen the posters of it on the tube, and it just looks amazing. Something that I've always wanted to do, but I don't have the adventure credentials of you or some of the guys who do it. So what advice would you give if you think somebody's applying who doesn't do this? And I know it's for ordinary individuals, but what do you think? What advice would you give for applying for that?
I think, to be honest, just apply. I mean, they do have, as you say, it's ordinary individuals. It's housewives and doctors and pensions people and students. It is literally open for anyone. Obviously, you need to have a conversation with a loved one or close family friends because it's a massive commitment. But the Clipper race, which is still on, you can apply just to do a leg. So it's potentially only 4, 5, 6 weeks of your life. So my advice is go for it.
And that's self-funded as well.
Yeah, but if you're only doing a leg of it, then it's cheaper. It's about £1 a mile.
Bargain.
If it helps people work out what to do.
It sounds amazing, and looks like you had some real challenging times in some incredibly rough seas. But what did you enjoy the most about it?
Sort of 2/3 of the way through, when you're really settled in and you've done, you've done the tough stuff. So there's a fantastic spirit on board, which is very inclusive and high performing, close-knit, tight team in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by amazing nature. So you've got miles and miles of sea and you can't see land, or you've got the stars reflecting in the sea at night, so you feel like you're in a ball of constellations, or you've got the dolphins and whales torpedoing alongside the boat, or the southern lights. So it's that complete and utter satisfaction with life, both people and the world, and performing as a team without all the crap that we have to deal with when we're back at home.
Yeah, I guess tough but simple. And so after that, you wrote Boat to Boardroom, and you mentioned that you've done some sort of corporate speaking gigs and the Performance Catalyst. So how has what you've learned, how do you relate it to business? And because it's seemingly two different worlds, but I guess there's commonalities that you try and draw out. Yeah,
well, luckily I've done business too. So I'm able to genuinely weave the links in rather than just being superficial about it. So the fact that I've been in business and I still am in business, I get business. I get the situations that leaders are faced with. So the only place it doesn't tie in so well is that we don't have any customers on the boat, but we do have a fan base, if you like. So we do have people who are kind of watching us and supporting us, but we don't have customers. Apart from that, there's such a close analogy. So if you're a business, you're all in the same boat. You're aiming towards a destination in the future. So you have to navigate your route there, which is like your strategic planning towards your vision. So your vision is your destination. You're constantly strategic planning, which is you're navigating to get there. Tactically, on a daily basis, you're tweaking your performance all the time to make sure that you stick to that route. You deal with crisis, which is Southern Ocean or bad weather, and it's how you deal with that and how you cope and come out the other side more resilient and tough. You've got your leadership team, you've got your middle managers, you've got your crew, you've got to keep them motivated and engaged, and it's about skill and attitude. There's so much that's similar. So quite often what we'll do is we'll talk about one incident during the yacht race, and then we ask business leaders, what should be happening here? What is going on? What is the leader thinking and feeling? And what's the team doing at this point and why? And then we just draw it across to business and say, okay, so what can you learn from this extreme situation and take into business? And there's tons there about, crisis management and obviously teamwork, motivation, leadership, strategic planning, high performance, all that stuff. It's quite an easy one to put across.
Well, one of your workshops I noticed is called the Racing Rules: How to Win at Business and in Life. Uh, we obviously won't go through all seven, but what do you think are the top one or two things that in maybe in life and in business they're the same, but if you could just, what do you think are the most important things to living well that maybe are in there?
Well, like one is best for both. So all our decision making was focused on what was best for both, and businesses quite often don't do that. So businesses make decisions that are full of bias and politics and prejudice and emotion and history and legacy and all that, and it's not always the best decision to make. So we share, for instance, best for both, which is all the decision making then becomes quite objective and easy because you get rid of all the prejudices and politics. Another one is just like practicing and planning your man overboard. So it's really crisis planning and preparation. But if you know your most likely, most impactful worst case scenario, the actual planning and preparing and practicing for it gives you a good discipline. It's not that maybe you'll ever even have that bad scenario, hopefully, but in preparing, talking about it, getting it out on the table, practicing for it, it does give you a drill and a discipline and a clarification around communication levels and stuff like that.
So for a boat race like that, where it's very extreme, it's obviously really important to have that kind of plan. But for a lot of people who I meet in the adventure community and in fact myself and my girlfriend are just going on a cycle touring trip. So do you think that it's necessary to do any sort of crisis management? Sounds a little bit extreme, but I think a lot of people take the laissez-faire, hands-off approach. Do you think it's necessary to have any emergency plan for that kind of stuff, or is it not quite extreme enough to warrant that?
George, you got me there. I'm so in two minds about that question because I have done some crazy laissez-faire adventures, and that is, in a way, the definition of adventure, isn't it? That you don't know what's going to happen and you're not quite 100% planned and prepared and you just go for it. And I think there's a lot of fun and enjoyment from that. So my paddling the Mekong, I had no crisis preparation and planning whatsoever. We literally flew out, bought a boat off a tribe and started rowing. And it was fantastic. It was fantastic. Our plan, if we capsized, was just literally to swim to the shore and try and hack our way through the jungle to try and find a village and try and get back to the airport. Having said that, with the bigger, well, that was quite big, but, with the global challenge and South Pole, I was as planned and prepared as you ever could be. South Pole especially, I was even practicing weeing inside a bottle before I left. And
always important.
Well, you don't know how much you do. And I was worried it might go over the top.
I'm going to have a go today.
So I did buy a thing to wee in, but then I thought, I don't even know what the quantity is going to be. So I was so prepared. So I think both, if I'm allowed to say both, so long as it's obviously not too dangerous, then some adventures are, hop on your bike and go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got a lot of more exciting stuff left on your bucket list, or I should say, you don't call it a bucket list, but on your list of things that you really want to do. Are there any that particularly stand out that you're most excited for?
Well, my current one, which is blooming huge, which is my fault for making it huge, is called 50 Good Turns. And it's about cycling across all 50 countries of Europe, which is like tens of thousands of miles, not in one go, but, in blocks over time, and to do one good turn in each country as I cycle through it. And I've also made up a rule, which is I have to cycle each one with a unique cycling buddy. So basically it's 50 countries, 50 charities and 50 people. And it's going to take blooming 3 or 4 years. And I'm sure I'm going to fall off 20 times during that, I don't know, at least, and have punches and have all sorts of issues. But it's so exciting. So I've got a map of Europe right next to me as we speak, George. I bought a great big laminated map and all the countries are on it, all 50. And I've coloured in England and Malta so far because I did them last year.
Nearly there then.
It's a huge project. I'm doing Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania in May. But at the moment, I've only got a unique cycling buddy for Estonia. So I need to find 2 other people for Latvia and Lithuania who might be local, which is fine. I also need to find 3 charity projects that I can work with. I need to work out how to get there and how to get back, and then the routing and where I'm going to stay and all that. So, even just those 3 little countries are in themselves massive projects, and that's in May, let alone Russia and Sweden, which are huge.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing idea. Nothing gets the adventure juices flowing better than just a massive map on the wall.
Yeah.
And so when you say a good turn in these places, what might that look like? You mentioned getting in touch with charities, but what sort of things might you have in mind?
Well, when I did England, I helped the homeless. So there was a charity that I was helping to talk with and try and support the homeless. And then in Malta, I was playing with and trying to manage children with autism. So some good deeds, I don't mind if they're spontaneous and they kind of just happen. But other things I'm really happy to set up through local charities. So I want to help them with their PR. So if there's a story to be told or a photo to be taken that we can leverage with local or national press, fantastic. I want to help them with my time and the person I'm cycling with. So we're giving, hours or half a day or a day of our time. And then ideally, if I got a sponsor, I'd like to help them financially too. So that's the plan.
What an awesome idea. That sounds great. I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. And so you've obviously done lots of adventures and ones that are more personal based, and then this one that seems a little bit more altruistic or externally based. And do you think that adventure should have something extra? So they call it Adventure Plus often, whether it's to make it purposeful, I guess, whether it's for the environment or for charity or something, or do you think that there's also merit in a good adventure trip that's just for the sake of it, for having fun?
I definitely think there's merit in just having fun, and like we were saying before, it's a sort of potentially a selfish idea, but what the heck, have fun and just go for it, and don't worry too much about other stuff. There's a lovely liberation there, and I think there's a lot of stuff going on in the last 5 years or so, which is very charity based, which is fantastic, of course, but I don't think people should force it or think they have to tick that box. But I do think the sort of campaign I've just described just gives you more back anyway. So the fact I am helping some charities, hopefully it will genuinely help them, and I'm not just a do good at getting in the way. But it will also give back to me. So my adventure, I think, will be magnified by being more altruistic. And even my cycling buddy for Estonia, he's lost 50 pounds in weight to cycle with me. So it's a massive challenge for him. He's taken it on. We shook hands and committed to each other that we would do this thing. But for him, it is his big adventure. It is his big life thing. And he's told all of his friends, we're getting T-shirts printed. He's lost 50 pounds. We're going to meet and cycle around, one of the parks in London next weekend. It's already having such a lovely impact on him. But in return, it's making me smile and giving me a fantastic, buzz and story about it. So that's just one tiny element of this huge project.
Wow, that sounds amazing. The joy of giving, unparalleled.
Yeah.
So if you've got time, we've just got a couple more questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so this one is changing tack a little bit, but if I made you supreme ruler of the world, what would be the first thing that you would change?
Funny enough, I slightly had that conversation the other day about there's 17 global goals for 2030 or something. And a lot of it is about, sustainable world and, protecting the environment. So the first thing I would do is just to sort out a bunch of really incredibly brilliant people to then sort out the world, because I can't do it on my own. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Assemble the best and get them working on it instead of in banks and management consulting firms.
Yeah. To just have an agenda and have a strategy and get a really amazing bunch of people on it. And then I'd like to save the world.
That sounds like a plan. I'm in. So you've done all of these amazing adventures, but who are some of the people who are maybe your heroes or people that just inspired you along the way?
So one answer would be, I think everyone has got it in them to be amazing and to be a hero. So I am freshly inspired every day by meeting just everybody and anybody. I think everyone's got a bit of hero in them, you see, and I think everyone has the potential to be a hero. So in a way, one answer is everybody inspires me all the time, especially if they're unleashed or unlocked or allowed to blossom. So that's one answer.
So my final question is, I guess you've sort of already answered it, but I asked this to all the guests, so love to hear your thoughts a little bit more. Do you think that heroes are born or made?
Okay, so I think the raw material, the raw talent is born. Having said that, I think there's an awful lot of influences externally, and therefore how they're interpreted internally that will then release that hero. So you could say 30%, if you like, is born, but I think there's a huge the external influences, but also what you therefore do with those inside yourself that will really make and release that hero out.
Very good answer. Very interesting. Paula Reid, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really interesting to hear your thoughts on your journeys and on the big questions and the small. So thank you so much for that. If people want to find out a little bit more about you and your adventures and your talks and that kind of stuff, where's a good place for them to follow up?
I think my website's easiest because you can contact me through that too, and it generally has updates about what I'm up to. So it's just my name, www.paulareid.com.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, Paula Reid. Until next time.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
There we have it. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, spread the love and share it with anyone you think would also benefit from it by sharing it on Facebook or Twitter with the hashtag #WeNeedMoreHeroes. Connect with me on Facebook and Instagram @WeNeedMoreHeroes and just more_heroes on Twitter. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and in fact any of our other episodes, so get in touch at weneedmoreheroes.co. Thanks so much for tuning in and sharing the love. And thank you again to today's sponsors, Cotswolds Outdoor, Cross Bikes, Garmin and Cumulus for making this show happen. You've heard the magic, now do something with it and be the hero in your own story.
Can I just say about your photo?
Yes.
You're a lot younger than I thought, because in England, the name George is like old men, so I was picturing an old man. Can I just ask a quick question before you start?
Yeah.
Who's typical audience profile? Because you just said kicking balls, which is obviously a bit naughty. So can I say stuff like that? Or who normally...
Explicit language is absolutely allowed.